I persevered for years and years without really believing in myself.
There's a moment in almost every meaningful pursuit when doubt begins to speak louder than belief. For nearly 3 decades, Steven Pressfield pursued a dream that gave him very little reason to believe it would ever happen. 21 jobs, 11 different states, 27 years before writing The War of Art, a book that has transformed the way millions think about creativity, discipline, and pursuing meaningful work. But those years didn't just shape Steven's own journey. They led him to understand a battle that all of us face. He called it resistance. Resistance is that invisible force that keeps us from doing the work we're most meant to do.
If we want to know the truth, just put the opposite of what it's telling you. Whatever it's saying to you, it's lying.
It's an idea that has helped millions understand that some of our greatest obstacles aren't always the ones around us, but the ones within us.
Self-doubt can be a really positive thing if you think of it as the voice of resistance, because it's telling you you're not good enough, etc., etc. But since resistance is always lying, the truth is you are good enough to do it.
In this one-on-one conversation, we explore why we procrastinate, why self-doubt often grows louder the closer we get to doing meaningful work, whether failure is delaying us or preparing us, and what separates the people who eventually succeed from the ones who quietly walk away.
The real skill that any creative person or an artist needs to develop, above and beyond any skill of writing or filmmaking or anything, is just the ability to keep going. Don't quit.
This is One-on-One with Andro Mammo. I have wanted to have a conversation with you for years, so thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to make this happen.
Well, thanks for having me.
Of course. You spent your life writing about warriors, about artists, about people that are searching for meaning. And looking back at your own life, what battle would you say that you've been battling all of these years?
My battle has definitely been to try to face up to my own calling as a writer. I've been ran away from it for many years, and certainly at the point where I finally embraced it, that was sort of the turning point of my life. So that's been the struggle, to believe in myself enough to do it, and then to train myself enough to be able to do the work as a professional and manage my emotions and et cetera, et cetera.
You mentioned that you ran away from this for a long time. Do you remember when you first realized that writing would be part of your future?
I sort of got into writing in a ass backwards way, where I was working at an ad agency as a young junior copywriter, and I had a boss named Ed Hannibal who wrote a novel, and it was a hit. It was an immediate hit. So I thought, well, why don't I do that? So I had no real calling in that nature. I wasn't a kid that dreamed of doing that, and I certainly had no concept of how hard it would be and what it would take. So I sort of, after falling into it that way, when I ran into all the many troubles that you run into, I thought to myself, well, you're a faker to begin with. You just jumped into this, trying to imitate your boss. So it took me a long time to believe in myself, and a lot of other ups and downs along the way, before I realized that that was my calling, and I really was on the right track.
Yeah.
But I just sort of stumbled into it for the dumbest of all reasons.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned believing in yourself. I think that's one of the most important things that somebody could do with their own life. I have that sign behind me that says bet on you. When was the first time that you remember believing in yourself and your own abilities?
That's another great question. I would say, first of all, that I kept at it for many years, 20, 25 years, something like that, without really believing in myself, because I hadn't had any success at all. And even when I would look at my stuff myself, I would say, this is crap. I'm not getting anywhere. So I don't know. I mean, when my first book got published, I suppose that was when I felt like at least the wider world had accepted that I was at least worthy of that.
Right.
But I would say that I persevered for years and years without really believing in myself, which I think is a lesson to anybody that's thinking of following a calling. Self-doubt is a huge part of it always. And the ability to keep going in the face of that is what kind of separates the men from the boys and the women from the girls.
The professionals from the amateurs.
The professionals from the amateurs. And of course, we all start out as amateurs. Or, in my case, how unsatisfying any other course is. Over my, long struggles before I kind of broke through into any kind of success, I would try from time to time to go straight, to get kind of a straight job. And it just never worked for me. At the end of the day, I was so depressed that I would have to, sit down and try to type something or write something just to kind of get my head back straight. So it wasn't so much that I really wanted it as that I just didn't want what else I could come up with.
What would you say those early years taught you about yourself?
They just taught me that I just had one road that was going to really work for me, that was going to make me feel peace of mind at the end of the day. And that all of the other things that I tried, and I tried a lot of things, just didn't work for me, that I was cut out, basically only to do one thing.
And here you are. So throughout your journey, what would you say has been the biggest truth that you've been trying to learn about yourself?
Just that I had a certain calling and that nothing else was going to make me feel good at the end of the day.
Speaking about your journey, you worked 21 jobs in 11 different states. You kept at it. You kept on that path that led you here. Would you say, looking back, were those years delaying your purpose, or were they preparing you for it?
That's another great question. I think they were preparing me for it. I have asked myself from time to time, if I had it to do over again, would I have changed anything? And having thought about it, I have to say no. The many dead ends and wrong turns that I took, and I think it's true for everybody, you learn,
Yeah.
And without that, you wouldn't be ready to do what you were finally called to do when you finally get a chance to do it.
Right. What would you say that the quote unquote failures taught you about your journey looking back now?
A lot of it was just pure experience, I think, that how life works, what people are like, what it feels like to fail, what it feels like to succeed, different experiences in different fields, so that if you're called upon, in my case as a writer, to write about something or something that's like something, that you've actually done it and you know what it feels like. So a lot of it's just gathering experience, I think. I mean, as a writer, how can you really write about life or any particular experience if you haven't done it yet? I know some people have done that, but it certainly helps to at least get your feet wet in something and know what it feels like. There's a moment that I write about in The War of Art, which is probably what you're asking me for, which I'll take a minute or two to tell.
Please.
I had been kind of running away from. I had tried to write a novel after copying my boss. It was a success. It was a total disaster, and I spent I think about 7 years kind of running away from writing thereafter, and I kind of landed back in New York, where I'm from, and I was living in a $115 a month sublet, driving a cab, and one night I just sort of hit a kind of a dead end in the sense of I was just driving myself crazy as I normally did inside my head and thinking, should I go out and get drunk? Should I go out and chase women? Should I go out and, distract myself in some crazy way? And for whatever reason, I know this is a long story,
That's
but
okay.
you know
Please,
it, Andro.
please.
For whatever reason, I thought, I dragged out my old typewriter that I had with me for years and had never sat down to do it since my first failure. And I thought, this is so stupid, as I'm rolling in a piece of paper. I spent about 2 hours just banging out some garbage that I completely threw away. And I went back into the kitchen. There was a big pile of dishes in the sink, and I started to wash them. And I realized that I was whistling, which I never do. And what I realized from that was that the sitting down for those 2 hours to try to write, even though what I wrote was complete crap, centered me in some way. And I felt like I found it.
Yeah.
I hated it before, but I can do it now. And I felt like, not like I would ever succeed or anything, but at least I found an activity. Like some people find meditation or other things that they do. I sort of thought like, okay, I'm going to be okay now. I've got something I can do that'll center me and keep me grounded. So that's the long answer to your question.
I love that story just because I do believe that there's probably somebody that's sitting there watching this interview thinking like, oh my gosh, that's exactly where I'm at. And it's just motivating to recognize somebody that has been in those shoes before and has gotten through it, and look where you are all these years.
And I think it applies across the board. Like if you're a dancer,
Absolutely.
If you're a comedian, you might write out your next, jokes or your act or whatever, or anything. I think it applies to any person in the creative arts. Just to do the work, to take the action, changes everything.
I think it's really interesting also. You spent 27 years pursuing something that the world wasn't validating at that time. How did you protect your belief in yourself during those seasons when there was little external validation that that given thing was going to work?
First of all, like I said before, Andro, I didn't have a plan B.
Right.
Anything else and from time to time, like I said, I gave up. I said, this is going nowhere. Let me just get a regular job. But I just, and I would, but then it just absolutely wouldn't work. So I didn't have a choice. I just had to keep going forward. But the other big positive thing was that for about 10 years before I actually sold my first novel, I had a career as a screenwriter. I just kind of stumbled into that. And it wasn't a very good career. It was like a B career. I noticed in your bathroom you got a big poster for Pulp Fiction. Yeah. This was nowhere near Pulp Fiction. But the good news of that was that it was like a college education in what a story is, at least as what Hollywood thinks is a story.
Right.
So that kept me going. I felt like I'm getting better. There's hope, I'm getting paid even once in a while. So that kept me going.
No, that's beautiful. I think every creative will have those moments of, questioning the path that you're on. And I think it's more about understanding, how bad do you want this? Is this what you're meant to do? And then doing the work that will propel you forward to get you there.
Let me say one other thing for anybody that's listening and kind of wondering if their path is similar to mine. When I had a career as a screenwriter, I sort of failed completely for about the first 3 or 4 years. And then what kind of got me, I wrote like 9 or 10 scripts that never were sold. What got me going, and I say this for anybody else that might be, was I got teamed up by my agent, with an older established writer, where I was a junior member of the thing. And that kind of at least got me in the ball game. So sometimes teaming up with somebody else helps. Sometimes finding a mentor where you're the protege is something. So in other words, it's not something you have to do entirely on your own.
Right.
Sometimes it helps to team up with somebody else.
Yeah, and I think also you have to be willing to team up with somebody also. I think there are some times where you're so invested in a project and bringing somebody else on board may feel like, oh my gosh, they're going to throw off everything. But I think a lot of the time it actually ends up strengthening that given project.
I couldn't agree more. And a lot of times we just don't have the full complement to make something happen.
Right.
We need somebody to team up with. We need a partner. And then like Robert Greene says in his book, Mastery, which is so true, the next step is at some point you do sort of outgrow your mentor, or you go on your path. But there's no shame, I think, in teaming up with somebody along the way.
There was one thing that you said that I kind of want to piggyback on. You mentioned failure. At this point in your life, do you see those failures as lessons?
Oh, definitely. Absolutely. I mean, how are you going to learn to do anything You're not going to, if you and I wanted to be brain surgeons,
Right.
we're not going to make that first incision or drill,
Yeah,
and then
it's not gonna
suddenly
be
we
perfect.
do it, right?
Yeah.
So fortunately, most of us aren't operating inside somebody else's
Right.
skull, so we can make a lot of mistakes, fail. That's probably a bad word. Whatever. Thomas Edison said, each experiment that failed, he felt like he learned something from. So yeah, you have to fail.
Yeah. What would you say is one of the failures, quote unquote, that you experienced that ended up actually teaching you one of the most valuable lessons of your life?
That's another great question. Like I said, I worked with a partner for a while, for like 5 years, and I was the junior member of this. And at one point, I decided, this is typical, I decided I wanted more credit, So there was a phone call where I called up my partner and talking about a particular project we had. And I said, I want full credit on this one, And he said, if that's the way you feel about it, I can no longer work with you. And he hung up, So I had a moment of utter terror because I was convinced completely, and my partner had convinced me that without him, I was nothing.
Yeah, you threw away your career right now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of truth to it because he was the established name, he got us the jobs, et cetera, et cetera. So I had to sort of really kind of dig deep at that moment. And what I kind of said to myself was, I had enough money saved to last a year. And I thought, in a year, I can write 2 screenplays. So let me do that. And if I can't sell them, if I can't go anywhere, then I'll just have to move to plan Z, whatever that is. But as it turned out, I did sell them, and I was able to get, my feet on the ground on my own.
Yeah. I feel like those experiences, though, where your back is kind of like against a wall, are the experiences that I feel like help you step into your own so quickly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, have you had something like that,
I have,
Andro, with
actually.
your podcasts and other stuff?
I have. It's interesting. I used to be a producer at iHeartRadio, and I was a 19-year-old producer. And similar to you, I remember I was getting a lot of the work that the other producers didn't want to do. And I was happy to do it. But then there got a point where I was just kind of like, I want to do more. I want to do more. And I sat there with my boss at the time, and I asked her, okay, so what am I working towards? Like, where do we go from here? I'm 19 years old. I'm a producer. I'm not going to be a host. Like, where do we go from here? And she said, well, I've been here for 30 years, same position, and I'm happy. And I remember I sat there and I was like, wow, like, that's crazy. Like, in my mind, I was like, I don't think I could be here for 30 years. I'm happy that you are, and that's great. But then I literally sat there and I was like, you know what? Like, let me bet on myself. I ended up putting in my 2 weeks, sitting there with her. I didn't wake up that day thinking I was going to quit. And then she said that this was the stupidest decision of my life, that people work their whole careers to get to this position. And then I remember I walked out of the building and I sat in my car and I was like, what the heck am I about to do? Like, what am I going to do? And that led me to starting my own production company, into starting my own studio, and then starting the show. So though it was hard, it was one of the greatest decisions that I've ever made. Yeah.
My hat's off to you for doing that.
Thank you.
It's a story. It's like everybody's story, right? There's that moment, including the sitting in the car going, what have I done?
Yeah, and again, it was hard. It was hard to pivot. It was hard to pick myself back up because, again, you have a position that's secure and you have all of these things, and then you just walk out of that building and it's all gone.
Yeah.
It's like your life is gone. But again, I tell everybody this was the greatest decision I've ever made. And speaking about that time, I found your book, The War of Art, in that time. It's interesting. This book has become a compass to me because, as I've mentioned to you before, I've constantly came back to this book. It's taught me lesson after lesson, and I feel like when I'm at these difficult periods of my life, I could open this book and it just refreshes me. It gets me back to where I need to be. It motivates me again. And I think one of the concepts that I learned about in this book that was just the most intriguing is resistance. Because I think everybody in this world experiences resistance, but a lot of the time they don't have a title to attach to that feeling. And when I read your book and I was able to attach a name to this feeling, I feel like it allowed me to see the resistance in every area of my life and recognize what that is and do the work against it. to push back against it.
Ah.
So for the people that are barely finding out about resistance, how would you explain that term to them?
I call it resistance with a capital R. If you ever sat down at the blank page or at a blank computer screen as a writer, or a blank canvas, or you can feel, and you try to sit down and try to work, you can feel a negative force radiating off that thing, off that keyboard, resisting you, trying to stop you from doing, what you want to do. Another way of looking at it is if you ever bought a treadmill and brought it home and found it, gathering dust in the attic, or you'd signed up for a gym and you find yourself not going to the gym, the force that's stopping you from doing that is resistance with a capital R. And we always think, or I certainly always did, that the playing field is level, but it's not level. It is slanted against us. Right. There's an active, negative, diabolical, intelligent, relentless force.
Yeah.
That appears as a voice in our head telling us we're not good enough, et cetera, or trying to distract us, get us to go into some displacement activity that's trying to stop us from fulfilling our calling of what we were born to do. And that's resistance.
I feel like it always creeps in at the period where it's like you're taking steps towards the thing that you're meant to do. I feel like that's where you're always going to feel the resistance the most. Like, for example, sometimes I'll feel resistance the most when I'm working with clients and I have to edit different videos or have to do different things. I'll sit in front of that computer and then all of a sudden I'm distracted, I'm doing something else, and then it just takes me away from what I'm actually supposed to do.
As you start to move toward it, it pushes back.
Yeah, like 5 steps forward, 2 steps back in many ways. When was the first time that you sensed resistance and were able to name it?
It's a great question, but I'm not sure there was any specific moment. I certainly had given it a name in my head for a long time. At first I thought, I must be the only one that feels this.
Right.
Other people are sitting down and doing, Quentin Tarantino, he's banging out the great stuff, and it's only me. But then as I began to talk to people about it, I realized, this is a universal scenario. So I don't know if there was any specific moment, Andro, but there was certainly... it was, I had given it a name, and it was very clear to me that it was fighting me and that I had to overcome that first.
Why would you say the voice of resistance is oftentimes louder than our own internal dialogue?
I mean, I think it always is, mainly because nobody teaches us that it exists. I think our thoughts are usually the least reliable thing we can count on. Mostly, like Arnold Schwarzenegger says a thing that when he wakes up, first thing in the morning, he says to himself is, don't think, get up, go to the gym or whatever it is. Because what he means when he says think, and I mean this myself, that thinking is resistance. The first thoughts that are going to come into our mind at the start of the day are to avoid the things that we should do.
Yeah, let's scroll on our phone. Let's, do all these things. No, it's so true.
In fact, I have a friend, I just saw this just recently, who's a CEO of a company, very go-getter kind of guy, and every day he writes out a list, 10 things I don't want to do, make the phone call to so-and-so, have a meeting with so-and-so. And then he says, those are the first 10 things I must do.
Wow.
So he's really putting down his resistance, giving names to his resistance, knowing that that's what he has to do first.
Yeah.
So that's a good way to think about it.
It really is. I like that. When did you realize that resistance was ultimately lying to you?
That's a good question. I mean, it just... the more I lived with it, the more I began to understand what its principles were. And one of the great things we can use resistance toward, and I know you know this, Andro, is whatever it's saying to you, it's lying.
Right.
So if we can just simply, if we want to know the truth, just put the opposite of what it's telling you. Like if it was saying to you, you're too young to be the host of your own podcast, or you're never going to be able to afford a studio, or this or that or the other thing, the truth is the exact opposite of that. You're not too young. You will be able to afford it, and so on and so forth. That's why I think self-doubt it can be a really positive thing if you think of it as the voice of resistance, because it's telling you you're not good enough, et cetera, et cetera. But since resistance is always lying, the truth is you are good enough to do it.
Yeah, and it's about recognizing that too.
Yeah.
You have to have, I feel like, a self-belief in yourself that allows you to see past the resistance.
Yes. Although I would modify that to say that even without the self-belief, you have to keep going. In fact, in many ways, I think that's the skill, the real skill that any creative person or an artist needs to develop above and beyond any skill of writing or filmmaking or anything, is the ability to keep going forward even when you don't believe in yourself and you don't believe in the project. Again, it's self-doubt. That self-doubt is a lie, and to be able to recognize that and keep going.
We'll wrap up on resistance, but I want you to just tell this quick story. So you wrote this in the book. Before you'd sit down at your computer to write, there was something that you would say out loud.
My prayer to the Muse, you mean?
Yeah, and it's interesting because I would actually sit here in my studio reading that exact...
No kidding.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
You're the first person that's actually told me that.
No, honestly, for real. Yeah, so I would love for you just to tell the audience about that because it helped me.
Okay. First, I need to explain who the Muses are.
Yes.
Greek mythology, the Muses were 9 sisters, the daughters of Zeus and Mnemosyne, which means memory, and their job was to inspire artists. So there was a muse of dance, a muse of poetry, a muse of epic poetry, etc., so on. And the classic image of the muse is like Beethoven sitting at the piano and whispering in his ear is this sort of ghostly female character who's saying da 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 dum, right?
Yeah.
So when the first book that I ever finished writing, even though it never sold, I had a friend, a mentor. His name was Paul Rink. He was a writer, like about 30 years older than me, lived down the street from me. This is in Carmel Valley up north. And I used to have breakfast with him every morning, or a cup of coffee with him every morning. And he introduced me to this concept of the Muses, which I never really knew about. And he told me that he said a prayer to the Muse every morning before he sat down to write. And he typed the prayer out for me. And it's in the War of Art. And it is the invocation of the Muse from the opening of the Odyssey by Homer. And it's basically Homer saying to the goddess, I'm about to sit down and do my work. Please tell the story through me.
Use me as a vessel.
Use me as a vessel. And what's great about that, I think, is that that's the way the creative process really works. The stuff is not coming from us. It's coming from somewhere else.
Right.
And we can't command the Muse. We can't cajole her. We can't bribe her. We can't say, I'll give $1,000 or whatever. The only thing we can do is invoke her, and it's take a very humble attitude and say, I'm here to serve you. Please help me out. And so that's what I do every morning, and it's great that you do it too.
No, I'm telling you, this book has literally just been a compass. Like all of the things that you spoke about in this book, I literally probably sat there and tried all of the things that you mentioned, and it's just.
And I made $1.75 off of that.
There you go. There you go.
Okay.
I think another interesting concept in the book is the professional versus the amateur. And I would love for you just to exemplify that and tell the audience about that concept if possible.
We've just been talking about kind of the airy-fairy concept of the goddess that's going to deliver, the creative product to us, which is all true. But above and beyond that, we as dancers, comedians, photographers, screenwriters, whatever, we have to be the instrument. And that means we have to have our shit together. We can't be amateurs. We can't be flake out artists. We have to be able to sit down at the start of a project that might be 2 years, 2.5. How long did it take Quentin Tarantino to do Pulp Fiction, right?
Years.
And to be able to withstand all of the crap that's going to happen along the way, to handle our emotions all the way through, to handle resistance all the way through, to handle distractions, et cetera, to be a worthy professional that can do the job. So as the goddess is floating overhead, giving us the good stuff to put out, we got to be ready to handle it. And that's not so easy. They don't really teach you that. That's one of the reasons why I think having mentors is a great thing, because you get to watch somebody that is a pro and that really knows how to do something and learn from them and acquire those habits. And I always say that an amateur has amateur habits and a professional has professional habits, and that the learning process is learning those habits and inculcating them.
What would you say is the biggest differentiator between the professional and the amateur?
Boy, there's so many, but I would just say that the professional shows up every day. The amateur, when he or she confronts adversity, folds, but a pro will always show up. The other, there's so many things, but another one is an amateur relies too much on how they feel. Like they wake up in the morning, I don't feel like it. I'm not in the mood, If Tom Brady was not in the mood to go practice whatever throwing motion or whatever it was, he would do it anyway.
Right.
Or Kobe Bryant, you can't imagine him waking up saying, I don't feel like going to the gym. He's going to go no matter what. So that's another big difference between a pro and an amateur. A pro does it no matter how they feel.
When did you realize that you're a pro and not an amateur?
Sometime during my screenwriting career, because you had to be, right? It was a real job. You were really doing it. People were paying you to do something. You had to deliver. And at some point, you just, even though you're an independent operator, you realize you can't flake out. You got to get it together and deliver something.
Right. And it's led us right now to the Arcadian. You've had this concept idea for 40 years. And it's sat with you all of these years. Why do you think it was the right time to release the book after all of this time?
Well, let me explain a little bit here. 40 years ago, I stumbled on a quotation from the Greek philosopher Empedocles, and I've kept it with me all that time because I thought there's a book in here somewhere. And what the quote was about was, in very high-flown, archaic language, it said that anyone who commits the crime of slaughter, i.e. murder, or a soldier who kills in war, might be legitimately, 3 times 10,000 years, that soul shall wander, an outcast from felicity. And in other words, the idea of being cursed. And I just knew, I kept that with me, because I thought, there is a movie, there's a book, there's something in here. And I have a recurring character in my fiction, a solitary mercenary of the ancient world called Telamon of Arcadia, why the title of the book is The Arcadian. And when I put him together with that curse, I thought, there's a book in here. I've got the character, I've got the sort of the subject matter. So finally, after 40 years, it became a book that is out now.
Let's go.
Available on Amazon.
Yeah. Stop right now. Go on Amazon, order the book, come back to the interview. I think the book is just so fascinating. Like, the more that I sat there learning about it, I was just so fascinated at the ideas and the concepts. And Telamon, I mean, was there something that you learned from that character in the midst of writing?
I'm constantly learning from that character. He's like this is the 4th book that he's been in. Sometimes a character will appear, we're talking about fiction now, not nonfiction, appear on the page, and you haven't summoned that character. You haven't blocked it out or written it down or anything like that, and all of a sudden the character's there, and it has a life of its own. And this character, Telamon of Arcadia, happened, this is like 20 years ago when he first appeared in another book of mine, Tides of War. And so he just has a life that he refused to go away. And in each book, he would evolve a little bit farther, and my insight into him would go a little deeper. He's not like an alter ego for me in the sense of he's not me, but he's somebody that can do things that I wish I could do, but I can't do. I just don't have that constitution.
Right.
So it's kind of mysterious that a certain character will embody a part of you and demand to be given a place in the sun.
I mean, you could tell me if I'm wrong, but as I was reading, I saw the curse kind of similar to resistance in a way, because it kind of keeps you in that same cycle all of these years. Was that something that you noticed as you were writing, or was that just
That I haven't even thought about that until you said it just now. I'm not even sure I would even. I don't know if I would agree with that, but it's certainly parallel.
Right.
They are both kind of curses that follow us and never let us go.
It's interesting. I literally was sitting there and I was like, wow, like this is very similar to resistance. I guess that's what my mind was.
I'm gonna have to think about this a little bit.
Yeah, but fascinating. So if there's one thing that you want to tell the audience about the Arcadian, what is it?
Just that it's a really interesting book that goes into some deep areas, and it probably is a pretty good introduction of my stuff. If you're interested.
I think, again, your journey has just been so fascinating. Looking back on your life, when did you realize writing wasn't just something that you loved, but something that you were meant to do?
Probably that moment I described to you when I was washing the dishes and whistling. But it's weird in that I don't know if I'd say I love it. There's Gloria Steinem said once that she didn't like to write, she liked to have written.
Interesting.
So it's hard work.
It really is.
Like anything. I don't care what it is.
Does it feel like a job sometimes?
No, it never feels like a job.
Yeah.
Because I would do it, and I do it for free.
Right.
But it certainly is a task. It certainly is something that requires effort and discipline. I mean, I'm sure Kobe Bryant, when he was practicing turnaround fadeaway jump shots from the corner, he wasn't loving every minute of it.
Right.
But the payoff was, to do what he was born to do.
When have you felt most aligned with who you were meant to be?
Ever since I started sitting down for real and trying to write. I think I'm up to like about 25 books now. And the first one came when I was 52.
That gives hope to people too, by the way. I hope you know.
Yeah. Yeah, I know a lot of people will say to me, like, you're 24, Andro, right? It's like 24, you're a baby. You've got, it's like kids. You love all your kids no matter what they are. But I really I love them all.
That's so awesome. What's something that you think that your younger self would have completely disagreed with that you now agree with?
What a great question. I think my younger self might have thought that you can be anything you want to be, and I don't think you can. I think that's a misconception. I think we're born with a certain calling and a certain strengths and not strengths. Our job in this material dimension is to find out what we were born for and to do it, rather than try to be, something that we were not meant to be.
Oh my gosh, you've been so gracious with your time. I mean, I don't want to take more of your time, but we'll wrap it up pretty soon. What has been a moment in the last year that you want to give yourself flowers for?
You're probably referring, I think, Andro, to our house burning down in the fires about a year or whatever. It's been hard to give myself flowers for anything, but I think just for this is another thing about the creative arts. What's really held me together through this time, and it's been much harder than I thought it would be, is the work. And thank goodness, my partner Diana and I, we've found a rental place, and we can both work there, and that's kind of what. So I'll just give myself flowers if I'm gonna, for keeping it up, not letting the momentum be broken.
I'm happy that you mentioned the fire, though, just because again, when I reached out to you about that, I remember it was really important for me to just see if there was any way that we could support.
Which I really was very touching for me. Thank you very much.
Of course. Is there any way that we could support in the rebuilding efforts?
No, not really. Thank you very much. So
buy the book.
Yeah, buy the book. Yeah, buy the Arcadian or buy the War of Art. Yeah.
All right. Well, final question. For anybody watching this conversation that may feel like they're at this place in their life where they're doing everything in their power to bring that dream to life, but they're facing resistance. They're showing up every day. They're not seeing any changes. What would you tell them?
That's another great question. The one skill that separates the pros from the amateurs is the ability to keep going. I'm sure Quentin Tarantino had a lot of nights when he was working as a clerk in a video store or whatever, when he wondered about that. But the difference really, I think, between those who succeed eventually and those who don't is just the ability to keep going. Don't quit. Don't quit. I can certainly say in my life, there have been years and years when I thought, I don't see any light anywhere. So keep going. Suck it up. Keep going. It's what you're feeling is not, you're not alone. Everybody feels it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. You've been so gracious with your time. Where can people find you?
I'm on Instagram. I have a website, which is just my name, Steven Pressfield. Every Wednesday, I do a column called Writing Wednesdays. That's sort of like an ongoing chapter from the War of Art. That's about encouragement and that sort of thing for anybody that's struggling. Mm-hmm. The books are in bookstores everywhere.
Can I ask you one more question, just because
Sure,
we're here?
We're here.
In let's say years down the line, when people read your books, what do you want them to feel?
I want them to be like any writer. I want them to be hooked at the beginning, and I want them to be pulled through the story. And when all is said and done, I want them to have feel like they know the characters and they've been taken to a place that they might not have gone before. Mm-hmm. Not just in terms of action or plot, but in terms of the deeper thoughts that are in there. Because I'm not trying to write light, fluffy stuff. What any musician wants, of their audience, or a comedian or a filmmaker, just to be caught up in it and to have the full experience and to enjoy it.
Thank you so much.
Hey, thanks, Andrew. Thanks for the great questions.
No, seriously, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
All right. I'll see you guys soon.